Next up is Marcus from LinkedIn. In this talk, he's pulling back the curtain to reveal secrets for driving high-intent B2B leads on LinkedIn. You'll walk away from his session understanding this and 3 key fundamentals for a successful account-based marketing strategy on the platform. Marcus, the stage is yours.
Hi there. You're very welcome to today's session. My name is Marcus Sherwin. I'm a client solutions manager here in LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to be joined to be talking to you today about effective ways of driving revenue for your business on LinkedIn. So just before we get started, if here on the first slide, you'll see a QR code on the top right-hand side. Feel free to just take a screenshot of that with your phone. I'd be happy to connect with any of you if you have any questions or any feedback based on today's presentation or questions in general. Feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn. Okay, so let's get started. Today, what we're going to be discussing on the agenda, first of all, is how to identify your buyer persona, first of all, and then how to reach and engage them on LinkedIn. Secondly, then we're going to look at how to learn how to drive high intent leads on LinkedIn. And then finally, we're looking at ABM, so account-based marketing, and what would be the 3 fundamentals for a successful ABM strategy on LinkedIn. So let's get started with the first part of creating your buyer persona. How does one create their buyer persona? So this is really somebody that's potentially a future customer for your product or for your service. So one tool that I find very useful is on HubSpot. It's a free tool, and what it does is it will enable you to identify who your buyer persona is and where, and just giving you like some questions to go through to really decide and fine tune who exactly is your buyer persona, what are their pains, and how you can address them. So the tool is free. It'll take you through a number of different questions in terms of where they are in the company, who they interact with, what are their responsibilities, who they report to, tools they need to do their job, how their job is measured, and then what are their overall goals and objectives as well. So I've included here a link where on HubSpot you can create this and then you can download that. So I imagine if you're launching a strategy on LinkedIn for your ideal buyer persona, maybe you have a few based per vertical. So this can be a good way of looking at per vertical that you're targeting, who are the buyer personas within that vertical. And this tool is very useful in order for helping you to ask those kind of questions and identifying them. And then later on, when you're targeting them on paid ads, of how you can take that information and set it up with your audience targeting. So first of all, what we look at in LinkedIn marketing solutions, when we know who our buyer persona is, what are we really saying, or what, like, how do we engage with them when we know who they are? So the first thing would be the audience. So this enables us really to look at making decisions at scale. And then it's really how we engage with them. So that could be through organic or through paid activity on LinkedIn. And then it's also in the environment. So most people that are on LinkedIn, it's a professional environment. So they're there to do business, and that's where business is done virtually. But also then hopefully when things come back to normal again, that we can have in-person events. It's a great way to, if you know you're going to an event, to research the attendees on it, to see maybe who you can potentially set up meetings with, have businesses or a potential business relationship with. So looking at the audience first, in terms of reaching a qualified audience. So obviously on LinkedIn, all data is first-party data. So you can look at targeting options. So these are just some examples here. First would be on company. So who is your ideal buyer persona based on company? What type of companies are you targeting? This we discuss in a bit more detail later on ABM. But this should give us an idea of who exactly are our buyer personas in that sense. And then also who What's the size of the company? What's the industry that they're in? Who follows them? Have you any connections in common with people that are working at these companies? The next would be in seniority. So what is the job title? What is their function within the company? And how many years of experience they have? The next then would be on education. So what type of buyer persona, what education do they have? Do they have a bachelor's degree, master's, MBA, PhD, etc.? The next then can be interests and identity. So this can be in the location. Is there a particular market that you're interested in targeting people for your service? What skills, what groups they're a part of, what interests, age, and gender as well. So this just gives you a bit of an overview in terms of the capability of first-party targeting on LinkedIn and how you can target those users or your potential buyer persona that way. So the next then what we look at is, once you're targeting them, how do you engage them? So there's two ways really. If we look at it in a grand scheme of things, there's two ways. One is organically. So this could be setting up a content strategy. You can, once you have your company page set up on LinkedIn, you can really look at topics following what are trending hashtags. And then also you will get content suggestions as well on your company page. And then you can monitor industry activity in terms of, for example, if you're targeting fintech companies, what is really resonating with fintech clients at the moment? And maybe you can create content around that and engage with that audience and grow your follower base more. The next then would be educating LinkedIn members on your brand. So this would be something consistently that you're posting content on your page daily, and that you can comment and engage with members via your brand page. You can publish thought leadership. You can share information about your company culture. So this is kind of behind the scenes, what goes on. I think people really engage with that kind of content because we can see that it's, everybody is human. They also want to see what people do on a day-to-day basis, what happens in your company on a day-to-day basis, the successes, the trials, the tribulations, etc. And I think audiences can sometimes resonate, and many times resonate with that. So this is another example of like how you can create more followers and engage with users organically. Then also you can look at LinkedIn Live and LinkedIn events. So LinkedIn Live will enable you to broadcast to the followers of your company page, and you can have guests on and talk about a number of various different topics related to your company, but also to your sector that your potential users may have value from. So this is a very useful tool. The other then is you can promote that live via LinkedIn events, and that can be shared out, can be promoted organically or promoted by a paid way of when the actual live will go out. So these are, before we move on to the next part, just to discuss these organic ways of how you can engage with your user. This is really a good way. It's the pros really is it's very cost effective because it's essentially free. I guess somebody in your company would need to be responsible for keeping up posting regularly and engaging with your audience. But it can be time consuming in the sense of it's not something that you will see the reward straight away. It needs to be something that's consistently done over a period of time. And it can really help. Your paid strategy can help your organic strategy and vice versa. So I think it's a very useful way to do, but I think you also need to think of this in more longer term and really building up your brand over a longer period of time. But it's a very effective and useful tool, but you should really keep in mind of the time frame in order to see consistent results when you do this. So moving on then, for the next part, we're going to discuss lead generation on LinkedIn. So how to close more leads on through a successful lead generation on LinkedIn, and how LinkedIn can help you do this. So leads that never close are just missed opportunities, and they also drive up costs as well. So really a lead is something that it's a connection, but it doesn't always necessarily result in revenue. And what we want to do is ensure that it does result in revenue, that those leads, that they are coming in with intent, and that intent results into revenue for your client or for your business directly. So prioritizing lead quantity sinks time and money into the business that may never become customers. So drive sales and marketing alignment. So this is something we'll discuss as well on account-based marketing and later, but it's also really important that at that first step, when you identify your buyer persona, that when you're creating content or leads for them, that's very, very relevant, that your service is very relevant to that buyer persona. And so that when you are generating those leads, it's within your buyer persona, but also that person is somebody within the organization that can have an impact to make a decision that can result in driving revenue. So if we look at the lead generation challenges that cause out fallout throughout the marketing funnel. So obviously with a lot of B2B clients in the marketing, we're not really traditionally in e-commerce. You can look at maybe 30-day sales cycles, whereas in B2B marketing, it can be from anything from up to 90 days to maybe even more than up to maybe 360 days or more. So because of this, things can move a little bit slower, but obviously that deal size at the end of that period of time can be significantly higher. So it's really important that everything is tracked accordingly throughout the funnel during that period of time. So the first thing really is looking at awareness. So it's owning the brand at that top point of the funnel, and then also then engaging with the audience. And then towards the end, then prioritizing quantity over quality. So it's really looking at when you're engaging with the audience, are they new? Do they know about your brand? If they do know about your brand, how are you giving them more information in terms of how your product or service is going to solve their problem? And then if they're further down that funnel, then how you can get them to give their details so that they can speak with one of your SDRs or BDRs and really get that sales cycle going to close. So then the solution really is owning your brand, communicating in the right way to that audience when they're in the consideration phase, and then driving those high quality leads for your SDRs and BDRs as well, that results in revenue. So you can do this in a number of ways. Here are some examples. So we can promote to members in a number of different, both in-feed and off-feed touch points. So you can see here on the left-hand side, you can promote on sponsored content, and you can also promote on video ad, single image ad, carousel ad, event ad, and then also sponsored messaging. So sponsored messaging ad and conversation ad as well. So these would be like one single image message ad in mail, excuse me, and then another conversation ad. And then on the right hand side, we have additional ad formats, so a dynamic ad or text ad as well. So these are a number of different ways. What we see here at LinkedIn that works really well is that if you use these products simultaneously, so you've identified your buyer persona, but then you want to engage them, and you engage them with a sponsored ad on a single image ad, but then that user comes through on a single image ad. You have they've filled in their lead information detail, but then maybe some have not, but they've clicked on the URL at the top of the ad. So you can retarget them later then with a in-mail ad. So this is really useful to making sure that they have multi-touch points in terms of where they are, but that message is very, very relevant, going back to the point of like how we've identified our buyer persona. Also then, you want to looking at what we touched on just now, as well as retargeting users. So one example of what we can do is, if we're showing a video, we can retarget those users based on the percentage of the video they've watched with a lead gen form. So this is also available for live and company page visitors and events as well. Retargeting is really effective because what it does is it looks at the amount of audience you've reached, but that may not have given their details for whatever reason. If you retarget them then with additional piece of content, but it has to be very relevant, that it's solving their problem and that it seems very personalized to them. So then that it can help improve also the performance, but also generate more potential revenue as well for your business. So these just goes through the ad creative assets of what's needed for sponsored messaging, what's needed for for sponsored messaging and also conversation ads as well. And really, what's just as a point of reference as well, we're on slide 21 and add creative assets. So what's needed for a message ad, and also then what's needed for a conversation ad. Message ad, you just need a sender, subject line, which you've up to 60 characters, message copy, you've up to 1,500 characters, and you have a destination URL, and you have a banner creative as well, which you would see on the top right-hand side of the screen on the desktop. And then you also have a custom call to action. Conversation ad, you'd have a sender, you've the banner creative, you've the message copy, and you've the CTR, and you've the destination URL. What you'll see on these also is that you will have a number of different conversation flows on the conversation ad. This will enable you to have a really good idea of like how it is or who you want to flow that conversation. My tip, first of all, is to keep it quite simple initially, and then see exactly where the users are flowing. And then maybe you can test with additional options. But I would say when you're testing conversation ads, make it as simple as possible where the conversation is flowing. And there are some examples as well on the platform also. So that's add creative assets for sponsored messaging. And now we'll go on just in terms of tips and tricks, creative tricks for lead generation. So the first thing would be keep the number of questions to a minimum. Learn the 5 fields, fewer good best practices. So the easier you make it, the easier it is to fill in. But as I said before, it's crucial that you have your targeting right, that you have your buyer persona right, and that message is very, very relevant to them. But from that point on, you want to make it quite simple for them to be able to fill in their details. But you also want to make sure that they're qualified leads as well, that will enter into your CRM, and that your SDR and BDR team will be able to then follow up, and that they know exactly why they filled in their details and why your company is contacting them. The next would be use predefined questions wherever possible. So these would be questions whereby they can just choose exactly from a drop-down menu, and it means that you can collect specific information to qualify the lead. Then make your questions easy to answer. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but it's really, you just want to make that process very seamless for them. Then make sure images and copy are relevant throughout. So you want to make sure that the images are very, very relevant, and that it's in line with your brand, and that they can recognize where the brand is, what the solution is, and so that it's coherent. When the user sees it on the feed, the next thing they click, the banner pops up. It's somewhat self-populated from email address, phone number, if it's connected with your LinkedIn, and then any additional questions that you ask. But when that banner pops up, the lead file, you want to make sure that the branding is consistent with what's on the ad. Then also be direct, making messaging matches the call to action. So you want to make sure the call to action is quite consistent. There's a number of options there. And then finally, you want to keep your lead gen forms very fresh. So making sure that they're updated at least once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks. If you see and notice a dip in the completion rate, we'll then check and see why that potentially might be happening. So that is lead gen forms. And then the next thing, what we'll just briefly discuss, I have a guide that I'd be happy to share with you. This is really discussing setting up campaigns on LinkedIn in terms of how the process works, a guide, and what objectives to pick, and what objectives they're optimized on, and also then based on your goals as a campaign, which one is the best to select. This is just one page here, but there's a very detailed account of how that may work. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll be happy to share that out with you as well. So the first thing really is objective. If we see on the top of this slide, we are on page slide number 23, I believe. Yes, 23. And if we look up on the objective, optimization, and bid type. So the first thing is objective, is brand awareness. And This means then that the optimization, it's going to be optimizing on impressions. The bid type then is maximum delivery, automated, target cost, and manual bidding. So this is really if you want to make sure that your impressions are viewed by as many people as possible, and that you just want to get as many impressions out to that audience that you've identified as possible. This would be the main objective to hit. Now, you may notice that you have quite a lower CPM on impressions, but it's also, this is just optimizing on impressions. That's all it's optimizing on. So it's, yeah, it really depends on the objective of the campaign. The next would be website visits. So these would be landing page clicks, bringing users to your website, and it's going to be optimizing on the number of people that come to the website. So they're clicking off LinkedIn and they're landing on your landing page. So it's a maximum delivery, impressions, target cost, clicks, manual bidding, clicks, and impressions. This one is for really bringing users to your landing page. You could retarget them later, but this is really what the main objective here is: clicks and impressions. So the next one then would be on engagement. So this is really engagement, clicks, and impressions. When engagement, I mean likes, shares. This is what it's going to be optimizing on. So it's maximum delivery on impressions. The target cost would be clicks, and the managed bid is manual bid, clicks, and impressions. So this is really looking at, like, if you want to create engagement around your content, this would be the main objective to choose. And the next then would be video views. So video views, impressions. This would be maximum delivery, impressions, total cost, views, manual bidding, views, and impressions. So this would be the basically engagement as well, but you're also including, it's just on a video format. So if you want to get as many views as possible of your video, this would be the main objective to choose. The next then on really more on kind of like lower funnel activity would be lead generation. So these would be just optimizing on leads. Now, you may see that your cost per click is higher. However, it's optimizing on leads. So it's generating leads from the platform for you. Maximum delivery, impressions, manual bidding, leads, clicks, and impressions. What you can also test here is that it will give you the lowest bid, the recommendation. So it will give you maybe what's the lowest, what's the highest, and it'll give you a recommendation in between the two. My tip usually is to start off low here and see how much traffic you're getting, and then adjust your bid upwards towards the latter half of the recommendation. If you start off higher, you may start spending quite a lot, and your budget maybe, it's maybe spent higher. So my suggestion here is stay conservative, monitor it daily, and adjust it accordingly. And then finally is website conversions. So this would be optimizing clicks that are not lead gen campaigns, but that are when the user is leaving LinkedIn to land on the landing page and he's filling in his details there. It would be maximum delivery on impressions, manual bidding on clicks. So these would be the main difference here. Yeah, so these are the main objectives. If you're looking at the slide, you're thinking the top would be really top upper funnel, brand awareness. Then the middle of website visits, engagement, website views, consideration, and then lead generation, website conversions. That's more conversions, lower funnel. So yeah, as I say, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would be happy to share with you a more detailed guide in terms of how to set that up, and then how what things are taken into consideration in the auction process there as well, when you are optimizing your campaigns. So moving along to your audience. So you now have, you figured out your organic strategy in terms of how you're going to engage, but then also you're looking at paid strategy, which we went through on lead generation and the various different formats that you can do there on website conversions, website visits, brand awareness, engagement, video views, etc. Now we look at like the audience, just to give you some numbers overall of LinkedIn. So we have up to 722 million users as of April 2021. we have 55 million companies, 20 million open jobs, 35,000 skills, 90,000 schools. And a lot of the growth of where we're seeing is 75% is coming from outside the US as well. You can see here on slide 26, it'll give you the 200 countries, members in the 200 countries worldwide, and where a lot of that growth is coming from as well. So we've about 174 million members in the United States, with Europe not too far behind at 163 million users there in Europe as well. And then obviously growing quite a lot in APAC as well and LATAM. So yeah, you can go through this in a bit more detail. We will share the slides out as well. Feel free to ping me, and I'm happy to share them out. Yeah, so LinkedIn really has become kind of the main place to reach multiple decision makers across areas of intent. Average size of B2B buying committee is usually about 6.8 people. So these are people on the board, people from different departments that have an impact in that buying process. And LinkedIn is the main platform of where you can reach and interact with those audiences at scale. So moving along to account-based marketing on LinkedIn. So for those of you that have heard of ABM, but are not that familiar with ABM, and you're wondering what exactly it is, how you can do it, why is it effective for your business, and why it's one of the leading things at the moment in terms of hot topics for B2B marketing. So first of all, we'll answer the question of, on slide 29, what is account-based marketing? So there's a number of different definitions, but I like this one here that we can see on slide 30, is account-based marketing is more targeted and personalized versus a spray and pray, where you just capture, create anyone in your net. You're being very specific about who you want to talk to, and it's a way for sales and marketing to align on the target. So that's essentially what it is. The common goals are the marketing activities and the sales interactions. And the main key goals here are revenue, deals closed, and retention. So what type of ABM strategies will you pursue? So start to see your target audience through the same view. So it's acquisition, really looking at a traditional application of ABM that guides new buyers from initial inspiration through to purchase. Expansion, promote a higher tiered offering complementary to product or build new relationships with different lines of business. And then retention, so ensure customers have the information they need when they need it, with a personalized content for most valuable accounts. So when creating account list, consider the 1-to-10 ratio. Typically, each marketer can support up to 10 salespeople. So every salesperson can support up to 10 accounts. So that's the main thing, really. I think one additional piece of information to add here is that the alignment between sales and marketing is crucial. So whether that's they set up a one-to-one meeting every week with the people that they're helping with their marketing activities, so both they can keep them updated on where they are with their marketing activities, but also that there's a feedback loop from the sales team to tell them how the quality of the leads is, what they need to refine, and how far along they are in the purchasing cycle. So this is really crucial. So understand the types of data and how accurate it is. So there's 3 types of data when building account lists. So you have first-party data. So this really consists of your CRM, website, mobile app, purchase data, customer information through any retention or like loyalty, anything like that you have first-party data in terms of your customers' information. The second-party data. So this is provided by another company. So it could be social channels, could be publisher relationships, it could be a data management platform, a DMP. And then the third, so this would be like third-party data in terms of intent data, technographic, indirect publisher relationships. So it's statistically aggregated from a data provider. So imagine that there are data points in there that are interesting, but it can be mixed with other points, and then you can match that and target those audiences. For a lot of means and purposes in LinkedIn, we're mostly discussing here first-party data. You could also look at maybe some second-party data, but depending on the region that you're in at the moment, I think there are certain challenges as well that we would see with, you know, the new update with iOS, with Apple, also with the cookie issue, with not issue, but like the advancements in terms of Google and so on with the cookie update and how that's going forward. So really, I think one of the focuses could be on your first party data, on CRM, mobile purchase data, and then customer information that you have as well. So these are kind of key questions to consider when you're starting your ABM strategy. So it's how many accounts fit your ideal customer profile? Where do your marketing and sales team already have a strong relationship? And then what data sets do you have access to, and will they be able to help to reach all key buyers? So now that we have that, let's just start with an example that we see here. So we have an audience summary, and we can see here that we have potentially 43,000 people on LinkedIn. So on slide 36, so we have the location here. We also have the company. And then we have the audience summary then if we go further into in terms of seniorities. So we're just targeting director, VP, partner, manager, and senior. The next then we look at what functions that they're in. They're in accounting and finance. Okay. So then if we really just tone that down and we say, okay, we just want to target a segment within that audience. Now, boardroom buying committee. So we're looking at, from the previous example, say the top 10 UK accounting firms for this example that we're looking at here. So we can see that based on the top 10 UK accounting firms, based on the seniority of that we have here, that we're looking at director, manager or CMO, we'd have about 6,700 of a potential audience. So now when we look at that, we have to think, okay, that's not a big size audience. However, the deal that we're targeting on those particular audience could be significantly big. One very important caveat here that we would mention as well is that if you're looking at an ABM strategy and your potential deal size is less than 50,000 euros, it's not going to be effective to have an ABM campaign, because given the amount of resources, the amount of time, it's really, you're not going to see an ROI in your investment. So this is one caveat. Ensure that the deal size that you have will be greater than 50,000 euros for either, if it's when I say deal size, I mean the overall lifespan of the account, that the revenue they're going to generate, not the first deal, but when you calculate, once you acquire a customer, how much revenue is going to be recurring, and over a period of time, if that's to equal about 50,000, less than 50,000 euros, well then really an ABM strategy may not be the best approach. So when we look at this here as the boardroom, you want to keep it broad enough in terms of director, senior director level, and then the buying committee within that boardroom. So we could look at director, functional areas, so accounting, consulting, finance, and then the influencing committee. So who influences the boardroom? So you could have human resources. You could also have IT. You could also have potentially the assistant to the CEO or the executive assistant. They could have some impact as well in terms of that buying decision. So the next point in terms of when we look here at accounting example, we're looking at that size of audience as well. We look here, we're going to dive in and just have a little bit look in terms of the seniorities, the functions, and then the companies here as well. And then you can see which is the percentage. So here we see 87% are directors. So we know if we launch that campaign, whatever content we're putting to that particular audience, that's very, very targeted in terms of the seniority of the audience that we want to reach. Now, what we can do then is we can really just see exactly how we can adjust our ad format based on that buyer stage. My suggestion is always is when you're targeting that audience, it's not about collecting leads. It's about really having a really, really good thorough investigation in terms of their industry. They're a director. So if they're a director, they may not be in the tactical day-to-day situation of your product. Look at more the problem that it's trying to solve, the problem that it's trying to solve for them. So once that you know that industry, you know what the challenges are, and you really want to make it very, very easy for them to comprehend that your solution is going to solve that problem. If you're targeting people more on the operational level, well, then maybe you can go into a little bit more of features and how you define yourself from someone else. But if it's more senior, you really want to look at what are the problems and the challenges of the industry in accounting, for example, that we've seen, and how that you are, your company or your product or your service is able to solve that solution. So on slide 39, you can see here, there's a number of different, these are just different examples of what you could potentially use. This is a problem identification. So this could be on video, targeting those senior directors. So the video is very short, maybe up to 30 seconds, really just explaining how it is that you're solving that, that issue that you see in the industry. And then maybe once you can see, then you can have a solution exploration, sponsor content. And then you could also have a solution exploration on message ads as well, just having that multi-touch product, and then a selection on lead gen forms based on where those users are and how you're interacting with those along the funnel. I don't necessarily mean to do this simultaneously all the time. The metrics for ABM shouldn't necessarily be always collecting leads. What you want to do is you want to create that awareness to that buying committee and making sure then that you're constantly engaging them and how much of that overall audience that you're reaching over a period of time. That's relevant to their sales cycle also. So here we'll give an example on slide 40, single image and video ads. So if you're looking at awareness, bring your brand to life. So you can feed a single image and video ads, given a multiple desktop users, points to your story. So this is kind of creating that awareness to that buying committee. The next then in the consideration phase, you could have carousel and conversation ads. So drive an engagement from top middle parts of the funnel, feed and inbox approach, and then message ad. So lead gen, message ad and lead gen forms. So using retargeting and matched audiences. Bring your mostly high engaged audience, bottom of the funnel, and lead gen form in message or feed. So these are just examples though, but it's really giving you that example of how you can use multi-products and engage with that buying committee right throughout the funnel. So what type of content to use? This is really important. So you want to really making sure that you're personalizing the content by the company name. So how do you do that? So use sponsor content to call the company name directly in the copy so that you have your list of companies, excuse me, but that you're really making sure that you are contacting them, that they know that this is very targeted towards them. So you could target, if you wanted to target all the employees, you don't necessarily need to do that, but you could just target those senior directors or whoever it is in the buying committee, but that you're targeting them and you're making sure by naming their company that it's very, very relevant to them. So here's a few examples we can see here on slide 43. So it's personalizing the content by the company name. So you can see that in the message ads and then also in the vertical as well. So it means that it's very relevant to that. When they see that, they know that that ad is being directly targeted at them. And then personalizing the content by vertical, as you can see in slide 44. So it's Snowflake is the example here. And they can also see, they can use sponsor content and messaging ad as well in tandem so that you're using that multi-product approach as well. So these are just some examples here that we've seen quite a significant uplift when they use those particular multi-products. So then really looking at, as we've seen already, the first and the second party data that you can get from your different touch points, as we mentioned already. And then also, so when we look at now in terms of you have your ABM, you have your strategy set up, you have launched your campaigns, Then we look at reporting. So how can you report on it? So what we see here is the frequency, right? So to actively influence a brand, awareness is key. So you're thinking about that top page of the funnel, that top part of the funnel where you're creating awareness, right? So the awareness is going to create the intent. Don't always be thinking about lead generation. Unless there's awareness created, you don't really have that intent there. So in order to do that, you need to ensure that you have a significant reach to that audience. And how you do that is you're making sure that they're exposed to your content when you're putting it out there. So you'll see here, for example, what we see, the awareness here, and then the blue one is on intent. So you can see here the frequency that we see here over a period of time can be up to 4. So this is a frequency of 4, which is like the medium of what we see. But really what we recommend is the brand recall. So this is taken as an example of what we've seen with some best practice clients for their ABM strategy. And the brand recall is usually that you would need to have a frequency of up to 10. That's a user that see your brand up to 10 times in order for them to recall it and to improve that overall intent there. Now, I don't mean just spamming them with banners, making sure that it's very, very targeted to the challenges that they have as a business owner and that your product or service can address. So moving on, we look at how we can look at that reporting when we see it. So once you have your accounts identified and you're looking at how you can see how engaged they are. So you can see that now on the platform. You've created your accounts, you've uploaded your lists to the matched audiences, and then you can see here how they're performing when your campaigns are active. So it will show you based on the company and based on the level of engagement, the impressions, the clicks, etc., and the engagement. So you can see that now on the platform. So it's very useful because also if you give your sales team access to this, they can also see then once they're contacting who is engaged and how engaged they are and how long the campaigns have been active as well. So also the next thing really that's very useful is on Sales Navigator. If your sales team have access to Sales Navigator, they will be able to see then who's engaging with content and save leads, likes, comments, shares from post. So it's very, very useful, and you can create alerts as well. So it's a very useful tool. So just to round up, what we would see then in terms of ABM. So what are the main things to take into consideration? The fundamentals really. It's looking at the marketing activities and the sales interactions. So ensuring that these are driving revenue, they're driving a number of deals closed, and that it's retention, so that the level of churn is being reduced. So these are the 3 fundamentals when you are setting up your ABM. Once that you have those benchmarks in place, but that's being tracked with revenue. So you want to make sure that, first of all, when you're reporting on it, you want to see exactly how much reach and engagement that these campaigns are generating. But then given the length of the sales cycle, you want to see, is this effective of revenue, and are the number of deals being closed increasing, and is your churn rate decreasing? So if we look now on the engagement, so this is really just looking at the engagement of what we see on these, of how to engage those users. So just to summarize, we have up to 720,000 users on LinkedIn. And with those users on LinkedIn, you can really see, as we mentioned already, of what key regions that they're in, and also what key markets are growth. So really, when you're looking at the companies that you're identifying and the level of seniority within those markets, you really want to see before setting up campaigns that you're targeting those users based on those key growth markets, and that how you identify them. And then, as we mentioned, the metrics with ABM of where you can find them within the world. So this is really useful. I'll share it with you as well in terms of where we see key metrics of growth. Obviously, we're in a global world now, so many companies will have a number of different global offices, and we're all working from home now as well, so you can still engage everyone, but it's just really just to show in terms of how the platform is growing and the companies that you want to target there on it, how they are. One of the other things I think is really crucial as well is that when you are identifying your ABM clients, it can be a good idea to maybe companies, if you think your product and your service is very relevant to a number of different companies, well, then I would suggest that you target them based on their vertical as well. So taking that into consideration so that you can have your companies, your vertical, and then the specific message based on the buying committee's challenges as well, of how you're going to address them. So that's it for today. I thank you very much for joining. I will leave my, on the slide here, you will see my QR code. As I say at the beginning, or as I said at the beginning of the presentation, I'd be more than happy to connect with anybody that has any questions on the presentation we went through today, or if you have any questions on LinkedIn in general, feel free to connect with me, and have a great day and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.